Most romantic relationships don't go the distance. And those that do don't always seem all that happy. What if we're not all bad at relationships? What if we're just bad at managing stress? Till stress do us part.
Hello again. Today, before we jump into part 3 of this series we started at the beginning of the month, I want to just plug something really quick that's happening right after this service is what we call our Discover class. And maybe you're sort of newer to our environment, or you've been coming for a while and you're like, I kind of like it, but how do I get more involved? And how do I meet people? And how do I figure out why you guys do things the way you do? The best sort of way to figure out what is next for you is to join us for Discover, which is right after this service. There is a free lunch, and it is delicious. And there's also childcare provided. So it's basically like a day date, okay, for those of you that have kids. And but it's a great way to meet our staff. I get to spend a little bit of time with you. You can ask questions, meet some people, and sort of find out, like, how do I sort of take some next steps and what's next on my faith journey. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't done it, everybody should go through this experience. It takes a little over an hour, but would love to hang out with you here today if you haven't done it already, or if you just really want a free lunch, you are welcome to come as well. But we started this series at the beginning of the month called Till Stress Do Us Part, about this idea that oftentimes what sort of splits our relationships up isn't that we're not in love. It's not that we don't know how romance works. And it's really even not the other person. Oftentimes, it's that we're not well equipped to deal with our stress and as individuals and as a couple together. And because there's so much stress surrounding us at all times, it gets overwhelming and we end up fighting each other because of our stress instead of fighting our stress with each other. And so this series is sort of unpacking how to do that. Why are we this way? And how do we move forward so that we can actually have a relationship that goes the distance that we actually want to be in. And so that's what we're doing. And even though it's part 3 today, if you didn't hear the first 2, this is still going to make sense. And there's still going to be something that you can apply to your life today. So I'm going to encourage you, take some notes today. Write down something that stands out to you. You can take a picture of the slides or whatever you want to write down. But something is going to stir something up where you're like, I want to think more about that. That's a conversation we may need to have in our relationship. And if you are taking notes, the title of my message today is Overexagerated. Overexagerated. A couple weeks ago, I had just a string of bad days, just where it was like nothing was working out. And the one day was just disappointing, and then I was like, well, it can't get any worse than this. And then the second day happened, and I was like, I was wrong. This is much worse. I don't know, have you ever had that where it just feels like everything just keeps piling on, right? It just feels like nothing is going your way, and you find yourself so frustrated, and I was just feeling overwhelmed about everything going on, and I really need to process through all of this. And so I sat down with a couple friends, Ben and Jerry, and some of you have been counseled by them, it sounds like. We didn't even have it. I went out of my way to pick these 2 friends up, bring them to my house, and so it's like middle of the afternoon, it's after work, and I'm just sitting in our bed, just eating this Ben and Jerry's, which I can only assume is a single serving, a pint, correct? And so I'm eating it, my wife comes home, and walks in the room and sort of catches me. There's no weirder moment than that, right? My wife bursts in the room, and I'm just like, mid-bite, And she's like, what is happening here, okay? What happened? What's going on? Because we've been together so long that she's like, I know that something didn't go well, and you're trying to this is your way of trying to figure that thing out. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it, okay? I don't want to unpack it with you. I do want to pack the rest of this ice cream into my face, though, okay? And she's like, no, we really should talk about it. And I'm like, or you could join me because I got you a pint. And she was like, no, come on, what flavor? And I was like, coffee. And she's like, that's my favorite. give me a minute to distract the children, right? And she comes in, she puts on her sweats, and we spent the rest of that afternoon, just the two of us, eating ice cream and watching Netflix with our cats. And that is in no way depressing to me, okay? That was amazing. And I enjoyed it. Did we solve anything? Not really. Did we actually talk about the issue at hand? Not really. Was it kind of progressively getting worse probably as we were doing nothing about it? Maybe. But we did this nonetheless. And I can feel some of you judging me right now, okay? But here's the reality. You have done this before in some way, shape, or form. You have had a moment in which you got some discouraging information, or you walked into something and you realized that something disappointing happened. It wasn't going to go the way you wanted it to. And the first thought you had was, this looks like a job for unlimited chips and salsa, okay? And you drove to your favorite Mexican restaurant. Like, your first thought was like, you know what, you got on your phone, instantly just started hitting buy now to all the stuff you loaded in the cart over the last 3 months. You're like, how much am I spending? Doesn't matter, don't care. This is what I need right now. You crawled under your covers and devoted the next 4 hours to TikTok. You're like, this is time well spent. And here's the thing. And no judgment if you've been there, because we all have, and sometimes it actually helps. Sometimes it's the only thing you know to do, and it's the only thing you can do because you can't even process what is happening to you at that moment. But for some of us, this is not just an occasion. For some of us, avoidance has become our routine. It's not something we do every once in a while. It has become our lifestyle. And we can't seem to shake ourselves out of it. And the reason that you've ended at this place is because, the thing that you're disappointed with is not new, it's not little, it's not momentary. It's your life. It's just not what you thought it was going to be. When you look around, hardly anything is the way that you thought it was going to be. You're not who you thought you were going to be at this phase of your life. And you don't want to deal with this situation because you don't know how to deal with a life that you never even really wanted. And so instead of addressing it, you avoid it. And some of us have ignored so many unwanted realizations about our life for so long that they've just sort of stacked up. And now we have no idea where to start. We don't know what to address because there's so many things left unaddressed that it's overwhelmed us. You look at your life and you just think like, man, I thought my career was going to be further along than it is. I thought I was going to have a career. I thought I was going to have a different career. I just imagined things differently. I thought I would have more about my life figured out at this point. There was definitely no way that I thought I was going to be living paycheck to paycheck. There's no way I thought that I was going to feel this alone inside of my own marriage. But this is where I am. And you look around and it just feels like I am not winning at anything. Like I'm not successful enough at work. I'm not present enough at home. I definitely didn't think my body was going to look like this. Something went wrong. This is just not how I envisioned anything. And the thing that is really frustrating about it is you look at your life and you're like, and this is me actually trying. Which makes it even more disappointing. And then we usually do what most people do at this stage. We're like, well, I'll just scroll through social media. That'll help. That's a mistake. Because apparently everyone online is crushing it, except for you, right? You are always only a quick search away from somebody who is younger than you that has already done everything you're trying to do better than you could ever do it. You're looking at these pictures that pop up and reading the thing, and you're just like, well, how is it? Like, how is this guy right here raising 7 kids all at once? He's got a 6-pack. He's running his 2nd marathon. He just started his 3rd business, and he's teaching Bosnian orphans how to read in his spare time, which how does he even have spare time? And if you're like me, this is kind of bad, but then like later you find out that he was on cocaine the whole time and has a secret family in Utah. And you're like, okay, thank God. I thought I was just a loser. He wasn't even doing it either. It's so much. You see, I think the hardest part of growing up is this right here. It's facing the gap between how you hope things would be and the way they really are. And that is a difficult realization to come to, which is why some of us are still fighting it. Because you can get older and never really grow up. And some of us are trying to fight adulthood. We're trying to fight maturity. We're trying to fight reality. We're living in willful denial because we don't know what to do with our disappointment. And we're stuck. And, you know, this story that we've been reading during this series in the book of Esther, I think has a lot of this going on here. You know, when Esther becomes queen, she's sort of plucked from obscurity. She's placed in the palace, and like she can't believe she's there. And in her mind, her plan is like, I'm gonna lay low. I'm gonna stay in my lane. I'm gonna avoid controversy. I'm just gonna do what a good queen does. I'm gonna keep my head down. I'm gonna throw parties. I'm gonna have babies. I'm gonna enjoy my life. And this is sort of what she does. And then one day, her cousin comes to her and tells her something that just shocks and stuns her, and she doesn't know what to do with. This is what he tells her in Esther chapter 3, verse 13, that an order was given that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day, and the property of those Jews will be given to those who kill them, basically incentivizing everyone to attack their neighbors and take everything they have. And the thing that makes this even a bigger deal to Esther is that she is a Jew, which nobody knows. She's kept this part of her identity a secret. Her husband, the king, doesn't know. None of his advisors know. She wanted to keep it that way. And she realizes how big of a situation this is and that she is in over her head. And her immediate reaction is, I don't want to deal with this. I do not want to face this. I don't want to be involved in this. And her cousin immediately responds to her by saying this. This is chapter 4, verse 13. He says, don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you'll escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance for the Jews will arise from some other place. God is going to do what God wants to get done. But you and your relatives will die. And he's basically saying, like, listen, you can pretend that this is not happening, but it is. The truth of the matter is, you can't hide from reality long term. You can temporarily, but it doesn't work forever. Eventually, it catches up with you. You are going to have to deal with this, and it's going to be unpleasant because you never wanted to be here. But despite what you wanted, you are here. And honestly, this is good advice for anyone about almost anything. Denying reality doesn't make it any less real. Have you noticed this? I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist. It still does. It's still there waiting for you. And yet a lot of us find ourselves here trying to avoid the situation that we're in that we never wanted. And the reason we end up here, I think, is for one of usually two reasons. Sometimes it was that we had unrealistic expectations about what reality was supposed to be, and reality spoiled those, and now we don't know how to accept it, right? You had sort of this pipe dream about the way you thought life was going to be, you know? I just thought after I dropped that first YouTube video, I would just start making millions of dollars. Like, what is wrong? What is going on? And then rudely, somebody revealed to you that that is not how it works for every single person. You're like, I thought as soon as I got married, we would just be happy forever. We would do everything together. She would answer the door in lingerie. It did not turn out like that. And everyone else is like, what? Why did you think that was going to be real? You have bought into a false reality. And now that you're experiencing the way life really is, you don't really like that. Other times, it's not that, right? It's that you had a firm grasp on reality, but you were blindsided by an unexpected tragedy. You knew what it was going to take to live your everyday life, and you actually had a good rhythm down, and then something that you didn't see coming came out of nowhere and just wrecked you. That's what happened in the Esther story. Maybe it's what happened to you. Your spouse got sick. Your industry just suddenly evaporated overnight, it felt like. A natural disaster struck. One of your kids was diagnosed with some sort of a emotional disorder that you've never even heard of, but now this is going to be part of your life forever. You found out that there was a plot afoot to round up and kill all of your people in a single day. That one's a little Esther specific, I'll admit that, okay? But you guys get the point, right? Another famous queen said it this way: all stress comes from wanting something to be what it isn't. And it doesn't change until you first accept it for what it is and then make a decision about what to do next. Her Majesty, Oprah Winfrey. But in our story, the Esther story, she's not the only one that is having trouble dealing with reality. The king that she's married to, right, he promised to care for her and be attentive to her, and he meant it at the time, and it went well for a period. But running a kingdom is so all-encompassing. It takes so much from a person and out of a person that he found himself having less and less time and energy to invest in her. And what is so wild about this story to me is that, like, if these two people, the two people in this couple were spending consistent time together, actually talking about their highs and lows, their hopes and fears on a regular basis, this insane situation that she's nervous to bring up to him would have already surfaced. They would have already talked about it, but it didn't come up because they don't do this on a regular basis. They're so busy, they don't have time to unpack reality with one another. And so there's all this tension in their relationship around this thing that they haven't talked about because they don't know how. And a lot of us, I think, in our relationships, we get to a place where we find ourselves avoiding certain conversations. We just know that the two of us, we don't talk about that for whatever reason. But the reality is we only ever have 4 options when facing an unwanted situation. You really can only ever do one of 4 things, right? When something happens and you're like, I don't like this, you can either change your approach to the situation, right? What I'm doing is not working, and so I'm going to approach it in this other way because I just can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. You could change your proximity to the situation. I cannot be this close to this thing. It's not healthy for me. I need to create some boundaries and some distance from the thing that is happening. You can change your mind about the situation. You're like, you know what? I need to zoom out a little bit because I'm focused on this one piece that's overwhelming or frustrating, but I've actually denied all these other things that are really good. And so I'm going to expand my view and focus on more than just the troubling pieces. Or you can do number 4, you can change nothing and stay miserable. And this is what most of us do. Given the 4 options, we're like, I don't really want to do anything, so I will do nothing, but I will complain about it to you every day. And these are the most fun people to be around, work with, and be married to, even though those people are often us. And this is really these 4 things. This is basically what Esther's cousin is saying to her. He's like, listen, this situation that you don't want to deal with, you can pretend like this isn't happening, but it is. And it's not the sort of thing because of how big and evasive it is that we can ignore and be fine with. There's nowhere to really run and hide from this. Even though you're in the palace, it is still going to affect you. But you are in a position to do something about it. You're not going to be able to fix it all, but you can take a proactive step, and you should for all our sakes. And she knows he's right when he says this to her, but she's terrified that taking any action is just going to make everything worse. You ever get frozen in the same way? I know I should do something, but I'm afraid if I do anything, it's just going to get worse. And so we find ourselves in a holding pattern, And this is where she's at as well. She's thinking like, how can I have it both ways, right? How can I save my people while also avoiding all controversy and cost and risk and discomfort and danger? And the real answer is, you can't. And we do the same thing, right? We want to guarantee that if we do everything that's right, we'll get everything we want. But that is not how real life works. And sometimes this is the reason that we're at odds with our partner, because one of us wants to face what actually is and make a decision and move on, but the other bristles whenever we bring it up. You're like, what are we going to do about this? And they're like, I don't like that. And you're like, I don't like it either. What are we going to do about it? And they're like, I don't want to do anything because I hate that I even have to deal with it. And then you're like, but we do have to deal with it. So what are we going to do? And the conversation just goes round and round and round. Let me ask you this about your own life. What are you struggling to accept about your life right now? What is it that didn't quite go the way you wanted it to? And you're still wishing that it could be something that it's not, which is preventing you from actually figuring out how to deal with what is. What is it for you? And here's why this is really important to you relationally. Whenever you refuse to accept reality, your partner pays the price for your avoidance. And it usually looks something like this, right? One of you senses that the other one isn't willing or able to like handle the stress of a certain situation. And so you look at it and you're just like, man, if I bring this up to them, it's going to go sideways. And so to avoid all the inevitable arguments and yelling and whining and pouting, you decide, I'm just going to do it myself. And so you take over and you do it for them. You spin your wheels trying to figure out, like, how can I do this in a way that they would do it if they were going to do it, even though we both know they're never going to do it. And once you got a handle on it, you unveil it to them. And your thought is that they're going to be like, oh my gosh, thank you. This was so helpful. But instead, they inform you they hate everything you just did, which deflates you instantly. And you also realize that they still don't want to do it themselves. And so you're hurt and you're angry, but because somebody still has to do something, you pick the situation up again, pull it close, and try and redo the thing that they didn't like that you did the first time. And the cycle just continues over and over and over again. That is until the one who is facing reality all by themselves has hit their limit. And then everything gets very real very fast. Where somebody's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it all on anymore. I can't carry it by myself anymore. And maybe you can feel yourself creeping up to this place in your relationship. Maybe you're in denial that you are already there. Maybe you're at the place where you're like, I get that like certain things have to get done, but like, here's my pushback. I shouldn't have to do them. And I love what the Apostle Paul says in response to this. Listen to this. This is Galatians chapter 6, verse 3. If you think you're too important to help, you're only fooling yourself. You're not that important. That's the Apostle Paul telling you you're not that important. How's that for a sobering sip of reality? And essentially what he's saying here is relationships are about signing up to face reality together. It's not about sticking one person with all the unfun stuff so the other person can live out their dreams. Now that we're all uncomfortable, let me read you another rude verse you're not going to like. Let's just pack them on. Same guy. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Don't be like the people of this world. Let God change the way you think. Don't think of yourself as better, of higher importance or ability than you really are. Instead, be reasonable. Isn't that the thing that like non-Christians say that Christians should do? Hey man, you're living in a pipe dream. Like, be reasonable. And the Apostle Paul is like, I agree. Be reasonable. In other words, despite what over-caffeinated online influencers are constantly telling you on their reels, all your dreams may not come true. Some of what you want is wildly unrealistic. Some of those things are statistical impossibilities. You are not the exception to every single rule, which is inconvenient and unfortunate. No one is going to come along and one day just give you everything that you have ever desired. You may never reach the level that you were hoping. Be reasonable about your abilities, your limitations, your current responsibilities, your season in life, and choose to trust that if you do what God is asking you to do right now, He will lead you to a place of fulfillment, which may or may not look at all like you had hoped it would. But do you really believe that God knows you even better than you know you, and that He wants good things for you better even than you do? It's hard to embrace this. But what Paul is essentially saying here is you cannot make the most of what is until you let go of what you wished it was. And this is really tough for us, especially in a culture where we feel like we got to prove our worth, we got to seem really impressive, we got to do and be the best at everything. We just think like, man, I got to do this. I got to achieve this. I got to reach this goal. I got to measure up to all of these expectations. I got to prove all the haters wrong. I have to. And that is why I can't be bothered with any of these like little distractions from that dream, including all of the frustrating realities of our relationship. But what if all your striving for something more is what's wrecking what is ultimately most important? Your relationship with each other, the partnership that God joined together. The Apostle Paul wrote this about what it means to live life to the full. He says this in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Some of you are like, that's a great tattoo. I'm going to get that tattoo. And you should. Some of you are like, I'm not really a tattoo person, but like, I'll stencil that above a fireplace all day long. I will embroider that on a pillow. I'll screen print it. I mean, do your thing, you know? And some of you are like, I see it more as a lower back tattoo. And that's on you. But it's a great verse, and we love it. But I would argue that part of the reason that we love this verse is that we're really good at misinterpreting it. I think we read it, and what we want it to mean is like God is going to help me do whatever I want, no matter how unrealistic, selfish, or short-sighted it is. But what is actually being said here by Paul is that, listen, because of my relationship with Christ, I can even humble myself, be realistic about my situation and options, and make decisions that will elevate and serve those around me. And now I get that sounds impossible, but here's what you don't understand. It's not impossible with God's help. With God's help, I even have the power, the ability, and will find joy in doing the things that I don't even feel like doing, especially for the person God has partnered me with. Some of you are like, now that I know what it means, I'm rethinking that tattoo. I mean, it doesn't feel like I really want that anymore. Not as fun now. It just feels like a bummer. How un-American is this? A lot of times we conflate Christianity with the American dream, but there are a few things that they couldn't be more different on. When I read this verse and what it really means, it makes me think about this article that I read a while back about this pediatrician psychoanalyst. His name is Donald Wilcott. And basically, he was seeing clients and noticing that like so many moms would come in and they were anxiously obsessing over how to perfectly parent their children, and they were like nervous that they were going to get it wrong, and they just wanted guidance to do it just perfect. And this was bothering him because he was insistent upon the fact that perfect is impossible. And in fact, striving for perfection is actually harmful to both you and your family. And so he coined this phrase, the good enough mother. Maybe you've heard of it. And he defined it as like a good mom who tries her best, is loving and responsive most of the time. Not all the time, right? Because, she's human. She's not perfect. But you know what she is? She's good enough. And all of the research that he did and his team did pointed to the fact that it turns out that this is actually all these women, their kids actually needed from them for them to be themselves. For them to just be good enough. And that ought to feel like a relief to you because it's all you can be anyway. You don't have the ability to be perfect, but you can be good enough. By the way, this was in 1953. How much more true is this now? Like, this came out before the invasion of the obnoxious Instagram momfluencers, and this guy was still like, this is a problem. But he was onto something, because here's the truth that sometimes we don't want to face. Good enough is enough in every area of life. Because the truth of the matter is, God isn't calling you to succeed. He's calling you to serve. To live like Jesus and leave the outcomes to him. This is the hardest thing you will ever do. Jesus' nickname for it was picking up your cross. That's how hard he knew it would be. And it's also the secret to living a full life. And this ought to be a relief to you, because I don't know if you noticed, you're not in control anyway. Not everything is going to go according to the way that you wanted it to. Like, it didn't for Esther. I mean, she is suddenly informed that her people are all going to die unless she intervenes and does something that is probably going to get her killed. It feels like a no-win situation. She's completely blindsided by it. She's like, I'm not prepared to deal with this. I shouldn't have to deal with this. Why is this happening to me? You ever said that? What she realizes is, this is real. Even though I don't want it to, it is happening to me right now. And she does something incredible. She chooses not to run or hide or cope or avoid, but she chooses to follow God's leading and leave the outcome to him. And we know this not just because of what she did, but because of what she said right before she did it. Esther chapter 4, verse 16, she tells her cousin, okay, go fast and pray for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. I'll do the same. And then, though it's against the law, I'm going to go see the king about this. I'm not going to avoid it, not going to ignore it. I'm going to go deal with it. And if I must die, I must die. Man, talk about facing reality. Whew. Doing your part, trusting God with the outcome. By the way, spoiler alert, she doesn't die. Okay, I'm just going to let you know. She does save her people. It's like, I know some of you are going to be on pins and needles the rest of the week, and you're just like, I'll look it up in the Bible. I'm never going to find it. Okay, it's a long book, but everything ends up panning out okay. And hopefully, like, what you are facing, like whatever reality that you are going to have to be honest about, is not something so extreme that's going to require you to say, like, I'm going in, and if I die, I must die. Your spouse is like, it's one parent-teacher conference. Okay, you know what? Calm down. I get that it's intimidating to you. I get that our kid's in trouble. But, like, hopefully they're not going to kill you, okay? Like, let's hope it doesn't come to that. We're going to be able to make this through. But I will tell you this. You can't live a full life without taking full responsibility for yours, including the boring, disappointing, inconvenient, and uncomfortable parts. And we've all got them. And if you have a partner, that is the person that you are supposed to be facing this reality with. And it's not going to be easy. Uncomfortable conversations have to be had. Unwanted realizations are going to have to be made. Unrealistic fantasies are going to have to be grieved. I know for some of you, you're like, I hate this whole sermon. This is the worst. My friend was like, come, it's so encouraging. What? Is this encouraging to you? And I get it. Like, I know you didn't plan on your job being what it is. I know you didn't see the economy doing what it did. I know that you didn't envision her getting sick like that, or your kids struggling with this particular thing, or that issue that happened with your parents, or that things were going to end up here. But here's the reality. They did end up here. This is where you are. This is real, and you've got to face it. And you may need to bring some other people in to help you figure out how to move forward. My wife and I have definitely hit our fair share of moments where one or both of us is in denial about what it is we actually are facing because we don't want to deal with it, and we don't know how to navigate it together, and we got to bring somebody else in to help us figure out how to hear each other and make a decision to move forward. And we've gotten to be that couple for other people. This is what the church is for. This is why we exist. I got to tell you, some of the biggest fights that you're going to have in your marriage will never be resolved until you invite another couple into the middle of it to help you sort through it, to help you face reality and design some steps to move forward. Because looking each other in the eye and realizing that there are some broken dreams that we are going to have to grieve, let go of, and make some decisions about. And maybe you're at a place where you're like, I get it, God has something good for me up ahead, but I don't care right now because this is so painful, it's all I can feel. And I get it, and you should not rush through it. But don't stay stuck here forever. In fact, I want to challenge you to do something this weekend. We give homework around here because we believe that faith is action-oriented. And so here's what I want to challenge you to do, is to identify something in your life or your marriage that you have avoided addressing and try the opposite of your impulse. Just one thing. I know you're like, there's 7 things. Just pick one. It's going to be too much. And when I say opposite of your impulse, I think a lot of us, this is what we get reflected back to us in Scripture, is that we're like, well, but I feel like it should be this way, and I ought to be able to do this. And it's like, but you've been doing that, and it's not working. So maybe the Holy Spirit is trying to open your eyes and pull you in a different direction. What would it look like for you to do the opposite of your impulse, to lean into maybe what God is inviting you to try? Or you could simplify this by just saying, like, pull a George Costanza. I don't know if you guys remember that Seinfeld episode where he is just like, every instinct I have is wrong. Everything I do is horrible. It doesn't turn out right. Literally everything. And Jerry, they're having lunch, and Jerry's like, listen, if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right. And he's just like, I'm going to start doing the opposite. Anytime he feels this impulse, I'm going to do this, he does the opposite, and his life just works out miraculously. He just realizes, like, man, I have some poison impulses. And it's hilarious in the show, but here's the reality. Some of your impulses are not working out for you. They're not working out for your relationship. For some of you, God is wanting to pull you in a different direction. For some of you, it's identifying, like, I keep doing the same impulsive thing again and again and again, but this level of avoidance and distraction and denial is not working. Maybe it's time to try something different, to grab God's hand and say, I'm going to follow you and leave the outcomes to you. Whatever we do, we're in this together. And I want to pray this into your life today. Would you bow your heads across this room as we go to God in prayer? God, thank you so much for how much you love us, for your grace and mercy. God, thank you for the dreams that you've placed inside of us. They exist in part because of you. God, some of us are wrestling because we feel like we should have been there already. It should have happened already. We should have figured it out already. We should be further along already. And we are confused about where we are. And we're in this season of wondering what to do. And God, I pray that you would give us wisdom and clarity about how to take the next step, not to force our own success, but to serve the people around us with everything we are and everything we have, to trust you with the outcomes, to make the most of this moment, of this situation, of this relationship, of believing that in your timing, you will work things out for our good. God, bring us the level of fulfillment that only comes from picking up our cross and following Jesus wherever he leads, even to the uncomfortable places of temporarily letting something go to grab hold of something new. Make it so. In Jesus' name, amen.